Greetings, and welcome to Conversations with, Exploring Hard Decisions While Living with ALS, presented by ALS United Greater New York with our staff hosts Nancy Brenner and Debbie Schlossberg. This series of recorded interviews with a variety of special guests will explore and present topics which are sometimes sensitive, personal, or may not be addressed in regular support groups, but which we know often provoke thought and deep questioning.
Greetings, everybody, and welcome to Conversations with ALS United Greater New York's program, where together we explore some of life's more personal and sensitive topics together. I'm Debbie Schlossberg, Chief Care Services here at ALS United, and together with my co-host Nancy Brenner, we are bringing you today the second topic in our series, funeral pre-planning. Nance, take it away.
Hey, Christopher Hassan is the funeral director at Crabiel West Funeral Home in New Brunswick, New Jersey. While attending a celebration of life at age 6, Christopher received his funeral director calling. As he grew up, so did his desire to become a funeral director because he loves engaging with others during difficult times. In 2015, after already having a degree in accounting, Christopher attended Mercer County Community College and earned an associate degree in applied science. And in 2017, he received his license as a funeral director for both New Jersey and Pennsylvania. We're so happy to have you with us today, Chris. And we know that pre-planning a funeral can be a topic that might be difficult for some, but if we can normalize it, it will be helpful to all. So to get us started, could you tell us what the benefits of pre-planning a funeral are?
Thank you, Ms. Nancy and Ms. Debbie. The benefits of pre-planning a funeral are that you take that burden off of your family when that time comes that you pass. Your family at that time is first and foremost grieving the loss. But then if you don't pre-plan, they're also left with making all of these decisions in terms of what they should do in terms of services, what color casket, what type of flowers, should it be a visitation, all things of that nature. But when you pre-planned, you take that burden off of them, and you also get to select exactly what you would want for your services. That way, you know exactly that everything is being taken care of the way you would have wanted it to be celebrated.
It's a gift. So are there different kinds of funeral pre-planning?
Yes, there are different types of funeral pre-planning. The most basic type of pre-planning just includes the information aspect. So we would take down statistical information that at the time of passing would be used to complete the death certificate. We would also take down information regarding what form of service you wanted, where you want your service to be, and also we would take down the specifics in terms of like if you wanted the casket, what color, things of that nature. If you wanted to go a step farther, you can then provide financial information in terms of paying for the funeral ahead of time. We would then open a choices account. Choices is a pre-need trust here in New Jersey, overseen by the New Jersey State Funeral Directors Association. The monies that will be used to pay for your funeral would go into that trust account. Or if you have life insurance, you would provide your life insurance policy information, and we would just keep that on record.
So you mentioned the choices, the trust. I've heard that there are also other kinds of trusts, irrevocable. Can you go into a little bit of detail about the different trusts?
Yes, there are two different types of trusts that you can open. The irrevocable trust is used more so for people that are receiving government benefits, like if they're on Medicaid or Social Security. With that trust account, once the monies are placed into that account, they can only be used for the purpose of paying for the funeral expenses for the funeral recipient. So, for example, if you put $10,000 into an irrevocable trust and the funeral only comes to $9,000, that remaining $1,000 that's in that account will then be forwarded to the state. Whereas in a revocable trust account, once you put monies into that account, if you needed to make a withdrawal from that account, even prior to someone passing, you have access to that account to withdraw those funds.
Okay,
and if at the time of passing, there's monies left over, it would then go to the next of kin.
Okay, thank you for that information. Can you tell us
You're
the
welcome.
different options for funeral services? And in that, can you include the various religious beliefs?
So there are several types of funeral services. The most common type of funeral service is a traditional service. What that includes is a viewing if one is desired. It also includes the funeral service itself, whether if it takes place here at the funeral home or at a place of worship, like a church, a mosque, um, a temple, followed by burial. And then, so that's any religious group who uses that type of service. A service and cremation would be same type of service. It can take place at any location, funeral home or place of worship. But instead of going to the cemetery after the services, your loved one would then go to the crematory and be cremated. Then we have cremation followed by a memorial service. With that, if the most immediate family wants to see their loved one prior to cremation, we do give them that opportunity. The person's then cremated. After the cremation takes place, a memorial service with the cremated remains present takes place. Another option is what's known as direct cremation. So again, the immediate family would be able to see their loved one last time prior to the cremation taking place. But then after that cremation, there is no formal service that is held. And the last option, which is known as immediate burial, the family generally meets us at the cemetery and a graveside service takes place. You see that with people that don't necessarily want a service at a place of worship or the funeral home, or if they don't want a viewing, they might elect for an immediate burial. So that's a graveside service, so to say.
And the different religions can be accommodated in any funeral?
Yes, we would accommodate any religious group for any type of service. So some of our Jewish families, they elect to either have a traditional service, and a lot of times those services are at the temple, followed by burial at the cemetery that they select, or they might have a graveside service. Um, Other religious groups that we serve as well. For example, Hindu families generally have a service um, at the chapel that's at the crematory, followed by the cremation that's there. So every religious group, we accommodate them, and we have a service that works for their religion.
So Chris, if you pre-plan, is the price guaranteed?
Unfortunately, not. The price is not guaranteed. And the reasoning for that is because I'll use myself as an example. I'm 36 years old. If I live to be in my 80s or 90s, so 50, 60 years from now, what I pay for a funeral today, if I opened a trust account and put those monies in there, would not cover my funeral 50 years from now. And that's because the vendors and cemeteries that we use, their prices fluctuate all the time. So, for example, the cost of a casket today will not be the same even for next year. But what we do is if someone pre-plans with me and they lose that loved one that pre-planned, if it happens within a year, even if our prices change, we do still honor that original pricing if it takes place within a year.
And what if somebody is on hospice and they pass away, or if they're out of town and they pass away?
So if someone's on hospice and passes away, or is wants to pre-plan rather, if they're on hospice, we will sit down with the family or they can call in and give in the information. We can do pre-planning over the phone as well. We'll take all the information down, all the wishes down that they want for the services when the time comes. We will not take any monies. Because someone is on hospice, we cannot open a trust account. I've had times where um, we've tried to open a trust account, but the family gave me a cashier's check and then closed that account. While that check was in transit to open the trust account, the person passed. So we couldn't really access the funds in that check because it wasn't paid. When you open a choices account, those funds don't go into the funeral home's account. They go directly to the trust. So if someone's on hospice, we don't recommend opening a trust account. We won't, but we can definitely get all the planning aspect in place.
Okay. And what if somebody isn't ready to fully pre-plan? What would you recommend they do in the meantime?
If someone isn't ready to fully pre-plan, I recommend that if they plan on being buried, or even entombed, to purchase their plot or crypt. So cemeteries prices change every year. Every December, I receive new pricing from all the cemeteries that I go to, literally the entire month of December. So that what I would recommend is purchase that plot or that crypt or niche that you plan on going to. That way, you at least lock that aspect of um, planning in place. Whereas if you already know where you're going and you don't pre-purchase that burial site, and you decide to purchase it years later, you're going to pay a lot more.
Okay, thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
I would imagine that one of the reasons why people might hesitate to engage in funeral pre-planning is because they don't quite know what the future holds for them. So what happens, let's say, if somebody meets with you or another funeral director, pre-plans their funeral, but then they move out of state? Can those be transferred? What happens in a situation like that?
So I actually experienced that multiple times a year.
Mhm.
If you open up, if you pre-plan with us and open a Choices pre-need trust account, that account, while we have access to it, it is not owned by the funeral home. So it is transferable to other funeral homes. So I have families that pre-plan with us, spent their entire life in New Jersey, but then retired in Florida and spent multiple years in Florida and didn't plan on coming back. When they passed, their family contacts us or their local funeral home in Florida contacts us. We give them the account information and give them instructions on how to access those monies. That way they can pay for that funeral in Florida.
And are you able to do funerals in other states? Or,
Yes, we are able to.
okay.
Yes, we are able to do funerals in other states. I'm licensed in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, so I personally do funerals in both states. We also can work with other funeral homes in other states. So I have done funerals in New York as well. Our other funeral homes that we own have done funerals in Connecticut and other neighboring states also.
Oh, that's very useful to our audience because
Mhm.
even though anybody's welcome and encouraged to come view our conversations with episodes, we do cover New York and New Jersey, so it's important that we know that everybody's needs can be met. So, but that brings up another question for me. What about the opposite direction? What about somebody who is a resident of New York or New Jersey that's done their funeral pre-planning? They don't move, but let's say they're vacationing or visiting someone out of state and they pass away during that time. What kinds of arrangements can be made in a situation like that, Chris?
So I've also experienced that as well during my career.
Uh-huh.
Um, in that situation, the family should contact us, the funeral home that handled the pre-planning. We would then contract with the local funeral home that's where the death occurred. If this would be the most economical way to handle everything, because a funeral home in another state would give me different pricing than they would give a consumer.
Mhm.
And that's because that's funeral home to funeral home. Whereas if the family, while they were on vacation, went and contracted with the funeral home that's local to where death occurred, and then reached out to me separately, that funeral home local to the death will charge them full price because they're dealing with them directly. So I would definitely recommend reaching out to the funeral home that handled the pre-planning, let them coordinate everything.
So you could actually bring the deceased person home. You handle all those arrangements?
I handle everything. So I'll handle everything with that local funeral home where the death occurred. I'll handle scheduling the flight back to New Jersey or New York. And I'll handle getting all the necessary permits put in place and everything, all while handling planning the funeral that would take place here back at home.
That's a relief.
That takes such a burden off of the family.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's good to know. Chris, is there anything else before we wrap up this very, very informative session that you think is important for our viewers to know or to learn about?
Actually, I do. So a lot of people that I've met with um, do not want to speak about pre-planning. And I will say personally, not even just as a funeral director, but just as a person, as a parent, rather,
Mhm.
you should pre-plan to take that burden off of your family, off your next of kin, off of your loved ones. It takes so much weight off of them and off of yourself, knowing that everything is handled. I'm only 36 years old and I've had my pre-planning in place for a couple of years. I have a 3-year-old child. If something was to happen to me, I know everything's already in place. So she would never, even if she's older, would never have to worry about anything. So that's something that families should talk about openly and discuss what you want with your family. If you're not ready to fully pre-plan, you can always call us if you have questions in regards to what you should do if you're not fully there to pre-plan or you just have general questions. But I find that some people don't want to discuss anything regarding death. It's not something that's scary. It's something that you should plan for. So thank you.
And thank you. And I think those words really do encapsulate everything that we're trying to do here with Conversations with. Open up the conversation so that, as Nancy said in the beginning, so that they're normalized and they're not threatening and they're not scary. Something like funeral pre-planning, we've learned today, is a gift. It's a gift to your loved ones, and it's a gift of peace of mind to yourself. So, Chris, we thank you very, very much for joining us today. We hope that all of our viewers will take a look at Conversations with at our previous recordings and check in for future episodes. It's been wonderfully instructive to get to know you, Chris, through this process. And thank you so, so much for everything that you've shared. Chris's contact information can be found at the slide at the end of this recording. So thank you again to my wonderful co-host, Nancy. Thank you as well. And we hope to see you soon for future episodes of Conversations with.
Thank you both.